Welcome to Malpractice Podcast.
Oh, yeah, it's me. So, are you ready to get started?
I am absolutely ready to get started. What up, girl?
Yeah, what is up? I'm Jess.
I'm Sydney, and this is Malpractice Podcast.
This is what it is. This is
Welcome to the big show.
Oh, wow, big show. I didn't know what you were going to say.
I didn't either.
Welcome to what is it?
I started that sentence and I was like, we'll just see how this ends.
Welcome to...
Wait, I have a story to tell you.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a piece of yard art hanging on the trellis in my backyard, okay? Because my life is very, like, hillbilly chic. I have yard art, whatever. And a squirrel started eating it.
Okay.
Like, he's chewing on the yard art.
Okay.
And, this is important, he's aggressively making eye contact with me while he's doing it.
Were you in your kitchen?
Yes. Okay. So I got pissed. And I went outside and I sprinkled paprika all over it.
Did he come back?
Yes. And Eric was like, you just seasoned it for him.
Right. Is paprika like squirrel deterrent?
I thought it was like spicy. Like it would throw him off because it was spicy.
What the fuck, Sydney? You seasoned your yard art. Now the squirrel's going to be like delicious.
Yeah. He keeps coming back. I don't know what to do. If anyone has tips on squirrel deterrent.
Squirrel deterrents. My dad always shoots them with a BB gun.
Within the city of Houston, I think I will go to jail for that.
I don't know.
I don't have a BB gun either.
Brian Oswald has one.
Now I have a beef with this fucking squirrel.
I hope all people need to know that squirrels are out here attacking art.
People think squirrels are cute.
But they're rats.
I think they're like rats.
Yeah. They're sky rats.
Have you ever seen their teeth?
No.
They're like long and orange.
Let me look them up. Squirrel teeth.
If you've ever caught yourself out in these streets thinking, I bet a squirrel is cute, look at their teeth. You Googled it?
Ew. These are rat teeth.
I tried to tell you.
I can't look at more. Why was I scrolling so much?
Stop scrolling.
Yeah, it's scary. I literally have goosebumps. I hate.
I'm going to take my shoes off and get comfortable.
I'm about to say, are you crisscrossing? Applesaucing
I'm crisscross
right
applesaucing. Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
What else you got?
Well, Michelle and I took our niece to see Disney on Ice this weekend.
Fun. Was it fun?
Yeah, it was fun. I love that shit.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
And then she kept saying, I hope Elsa comes. Like, looking at me like, are you going to tell me? And I'm like, maybe. And every time it wasn't her, she was like, oh, I hope Elsa comes.
That's
like, looking
so
at me. And then when
cute.
Elsa, she was like, oh, Elsa. And then she's singing, like, let it go. Like, really loud.
That's so cute.
I have Disney Plus now.
Deal pickle. I have my brother-in-law's Disney Plus login.
Bingo.
Bingo bango.
Oh, bingo bango. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
you
didn't
like
know where
that?
I was like, oh, bingo bango. I like that.
I'm pointing at you, then I'm pointing at me.
Oh, I see what you're doing there. Nice.
You want to get into it?
Bingo bango Rego. Yeah.
So part 2 of our Hunted Healers series, we're bringing you the Salem Witch Trials. The U.S. is basically the annoying younger sister here, following along European systems and processes. Europe does it, so now we have to do it too.
Oh, yeah. Facts.
The European witch trials actually set the backdrop for an environment where lots of people believed in witches and demons and stuff like that. So that's where we find ourselves in the Massachusetts colony in a small agrarian village called Salem in 1692. I can't stop doing it.
You love that.
And this is where I'm going to insert a time machine noise.
So I always think about this in relation to when Europeans first came over on like the Mayflower or whatever. That was in like 1492.
Oof.
So this is literally like 200 years later.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
When you said that, it blew me away because I'm thinking of this as like the same time period, basically. But that's a long ass gap.
It's a big gap, and people are big crazy still. So
Big trash.
let's be clear. The Europeans may have kicked off like the mass hysteria, but the Puritan society certainly did its fair share of crazy things. Period.
Okay.
At the time of the Salem Witch Trials, we have the following. The after effects of a British war with France and the American colonies. So everyone's trying to take over of 1689. There's a smallpox epidemic that was winding down, which is, as we know, crazy now that we've been through our own pandemic. There's like native attacks because, of the theft of the land that they were inhabiting, and then people came and built their fucking houses on it.
Right.
And then there's rivalry with neighboring towns, which is just like all intersecting into like this crazy time right now.
On top of all of that, we have this focus, this fear, suspicion, resentment toward other people that are not Puritans, especially Quakers, Catholics, also their neighbors. Pretty much anybody could catch these Puritan hands. They had this. Did you like that?
Yeah.
Thanks. They had this like inherent mistrust of outsiders or people who didn't conform to Puritan social norms. So at this point in time, there was a near total puritanical control of the courts and the government, and they were deeply intolerant of anyone with other beliefs. I did not know this part. They actually, when the Puritans first got there, they would like torture unrepentant Quakers.
Yep.
So shit was wild. Plus, while the northeastern U.S. was being settled by Europeans, many of the settlements were living on the absolute razor's edge of survival because they came over with basically no supplies. But when the towns that had been settled for a while got into a rhythm, they found lots of problems within, like land disputes, your cow is eating my shit, whatever, right? Like really small, nitpicky things that they would blow way out of proportion. So that's where we find Salem in 1692. They've settled in and they're beginning to bicker and snipe at each other. According to historians, Salem was actually this is a direct quote, particularly quarrelsome group of people that were especially prone to internal disputes and bickering over land rights and where cows could graze and whatnot, which maybe sets the stage for the phenomenon that we're about to describe. So for most of the American colonies, witchcraft accusations were used pretty regularly, but kind of as like it's almost a way to get someone's attention for a different grievance. So if you tell someone like, your cow's grazing on my property, it's a problem, and they won't listen to you, then you accuse them of being a witch, and you're like, now you have to pay attention to me. Mm-hmm. Which is why what happened in Salem was so strange and different from what was going on everywhere else at the time. The story we're talking about today was an absolute anomaly, and don't get me wrong, there were other witch trials in the U.S. happening during this time and around this time, but none of them had the same like wild vibes as Salem, where everyone basically collectively lost their minds for a little over a year. And historians are actually still, to this day, debating why this happened in this way.
In January of 1692, a 9-year-old girl, Elizabeth Betty Paris, who is named after her mom, which is why she went by Betty, which...
Okay.
And an 11-year-old girl, Abigail Williams. The two were like a daughter and a niece of a minister. So they start screaming, barking, having fits, violently contorting their bodies and vomiting, just like basically going off.
Yeah.
A doctor diagnosed them with bewitchment, for which the cure is accuse someone of being a witch.
Okay.
Tell us who is doing this to you so that we can make them stop.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that they could diagnose someone with bewitchment, which is like literally nonsensical.
I feel like at this point, we have to seriously question how things would have been different if the doctor had never said this, because number one, that kids are like super suggestible. When I was a kid, someone told me this, so I thought for a while that chocolate milk came from brown cows. Like, you can tell a kid anything and they'll believe it. And I feel like if I was 9 and someone was like, you're bewitched. And number two, this medical doctor really, I think, should have known better. And if he was alive today, I feel like we would have to call bullshit, because this is some puritanical malpractice.
Well, it's also like, how you are a doctor, said who?
said me.
What school did you go to?
My name is Dr. So-and-so. And everybody's like, welcome, doctor.
Yeah, they literally don't. A, they didn't check.
No.
You are not a real doctor. I'm so sorry to offend you.
Also, what were the references? You wrote them down on a piece of paper by yourself.
Also.
These are my references.
So this man was basically probably a priest.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me otherwise. Well, you can.
He's like.
But I doubt it.
Bewitchment, period. And everyone said, okay.
Yeah. So the fits these girls were having in public would shortly kick off the Salem Witch Trials. And that would last from February of 1692 to May of 1693, in which over 200 people would be accused of being a witch. 30 were found guilty, which, you know what? That's kind of a small group if you really think about it, compared to the European witch trials.
If you think about it, 30 out of 200.
I mean, 30 by itself sounds like a lot. I just don't know what.
But it could have been worse. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, in some of the stories that I've read from the European witch trials, it's like, if they accuse 200, then 200 motherfuckers gonna die.
That's true.
That's how it felt then. Here, at least, it feels like you could maybe reason your way out. Or I think what it would be is someone would have to stick up for you.
Yes.
Because there were a lot of, character witnesses that were just, taken as fact, right?
I 100% agree. And then I think in Europe, everybody was like, I am so scared of being accused of being a witch. I am not standing up for your ass.
I am not standing up. They're going to tell you that you bewitched me and then I bewitched you. So
correct.
Good luck.
You're on your own, bro.
And which sucks. So 30 were found guilty, and in overall 19 people were hanged.
Mm-hmm.
One was crushed to death with boulders, which bitch.
We're gonna talk about him.
That is a fuckaroo.
Yeah. 5
people died in jail. I'm never gonna get over that. When I read that, I was like, ugh. If I slam my finger in the door, a bitch is mad.
Nope, couldn't be me.
Anyway, 5 people died in jail, and 2 dogs were executed for supernatural crimes, which is disrespectful on top of it all.
It really is.
Dogs?
That's how you know you've lost your mind.
Everyone should have taken a look around and been like, how did we get here?
Dogs?
Seriously?
Really?
So 78% of the people accused and convicted of witchcraft in these trials were women, and so everything sucks.
Pretty much. It's also important to point out that the reason we know so much about this story is that the Puritans were a very litigious people. They would take each other to court over just about anything, including accusations of witchcraft. Mm-hmm. So the Salem Witch Trials were very well documented because they were all part of a recorded court proceeding. But they're all official and on the part of the court. So unfortunately, we don't have that much personal data in terms of my name is Sally blank and blank, and this is how I feel about the witch trials. We just have, the official documentation, which is a real bummer because you've got to know that half the town was not on board with what was about to go down, and they were probably like, what the actual fuck is happening?
Yeah, and you kind of see that when everything unwinds, people being like, nah, but I'm not about to risk my barely their life anyway. I'm basically alive. Every day I wake up and I'm like, whew. So I'm not,
There's a movie I watched recently and it's a really depressing movie about the devil, I think.
Oh, that tracks.
At the very beginning, they're in a puritanical colony and they were just going about their daily business. And then I was sitting there thinking, my God, it would suck to be alive back then.
It's like Scarlet Letter vibes.
Yes.
Which
it's bad.
No.
Couldn't be me.
So, on top of being in a terrible time period, right? Then these 2 girls are like, I'm barking, I'm bewitched. Yeah.
To be fair, if you're those kids' parents and they're barking all of a sudden,
I would be fucking terrified.
I'd be like, this bitch is cursed.
Her dad or something was a priest or a reverend.
Right.
So on top of it all, he's like, oh, fuck, this is devil shit.
Yeah.
He probably didn't say fuck, but he probably felt it.
He probably felt like fuck. I would feel like fuck if my kid was barking.
I would be scared. So suddenly it spreads. So other young girls in the area have similar symptoms. Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Elizabeth Hubbard, Mary Walcor, Mary Warren. There are literally only 10 names at this time period.
Correct.
And it enrages me.
Mercy's kind of cute.
Okay, Mercy, good job.
Yeah.
That's unique. There's another Elizabeth, 2 Marys, and then Anne.
Yeah.
No offense to people with those names, but major offense to that time period. And it's Ann Putnam Jr.
Yeah. That's...
Like you named her after someone else, and then you put Jr. at the end.
There's like 2 different cases here where the daughter is named after the mom and it's Junior. And I'm like, I guess that was more popular then.
Well, I like it
anyway.
As I feel now that it might jab the patriarchy, but I know back then that's not what they were doing.
That's not what they were doing, for sure. Can't trick me.
So those new girls are like, we're going to accuse people too. So everybody in this little sorority of accusers, they're all barking, vomiting, whatever, right? On February 29th, they first accused a Caribbean enslaved woman named Tituba.
Yeah.
Like, on top of everything, that is really fucked up. So she worked in the Paris's home, and then they blamed a homeless beggar woman named Sarah Good.
Yeah.
And this other woman, Sarah Osborne, who was elderly and impoverished. And I told you that they only had 10 names, and then you see 2 Sarahs accused.
2 Sarahs here.
If these women were witches,
yeah,
why would they be enslaved, homeless, and old, respectively? Who, as a witch, is like, I'm going to use my witchiness to bother young girls and not get myself out of enslavement?
Correct.
And not stop myself from being human trafficked.
Because that would be my first order of business as a witch.
I'm going to smite everybody and get out. Right.
Correct. Cheers.
Like, immediately, as a judge, I'd be like, oh, these people not guilty.
Not guilty.
Bring me the richest bitch in this town.
That's the one.
And I'll believe you.
That's the witch.
That's the one.
Right. It's definitely just another case of them choosing easy targets.
Yeah.
And it's generally people who are often unmarried, often on the fringes of society, which follows this really well-established pattern of accusing poor women who don't follow societal norms. Or in Tituba's case, right? She's from a different country and they're like, immediately you're a witch.
Yeah.
And that pretty much follows the standard witch accusation patterns that we saw throughout Europe and in earlier witch trials in the US. If you were in any way strange to people or outcast or you pissed people off, you basically had a giant target on your back for being accused of witchcraft. And some of these women, if they needed something, I heard this in another podcast, some of these women, if they needed something, sometimes, I think it was Sarah Good, she would tell people oh, I need some cheese from you. And if they wouldn't give it to her, she'd be like, I'm going to curse you if you don't. So some of these women had witchy tendencies.
Well, she just had witchy language.
Right. You're also ignoring the fact that witches are not real. So these women were initially brought before the local magistrates of the time, Jonathan Corwin and John Hawthorne, who immediately began interrogating them. And I say interrogating with heavy quotes because I'm sure there was some physical violence involved.
100%, yeah.
And they continued to do so for several days, starting on March 1st, 1962.
Nope.
What?
You said 1962.
1692. Jesus, I'm numerically dyslexic. So it was in March 1st of 1692. Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne immediately were both no, I didn't do that. They both claimed they were innocent. But Tituba did confess. She told the judges, quote, "The devil came to me and bid me serve him." She says she signed his book.
Also, it would burn.
She's not the only one that ends up saying she has a book, but at this point it's public record that she said it. So maybe other people were
exactly
vibing with Tituba's story, oh, she said it and people believed her.
Yeah.
There are also several reasons that people may have confessed at this point, but Tituba likely did so because she probably wanted to save herself from being convicted.
Yeah.
Right. Same. In witch trials that had happened in other places, sometimes the women who confessed were just punished, fined, relocated, and then reintegrated back into society. And so I'm wondering if people at this point, before all of the hysteria starts, like Tituba, are well, if I just say yes, then they're just going to relocate me. Whatever.
I also think we see false confessions now. And I think that
yeah,
while maybe not as integrated into the process back then, I think it still is true that you exhaust people through hours and hours of interrogation.
Yeah.
And they start believing, they're maybe I haven't slept in 24 hours. Maybe that did happen.
Some of the people who were convicted but not executed that actually confessed, went back and said basically they did it for either one of two reasons. Like they were super sleep deprived and they were just like, yeah, I kind of thought maybe it was, they kept telling me over and over that I had been possessed. So I started thinking maybe I was possessed. And then in the other case, they're like, yeah, I still had my wits about me. And I was just like, please don't murder me.
Yeah.
So Tituba basically thought that she was going to be punished and then relocated and integrated back into society, but that was not going to be the case in Salem. Despite Tituba's confession, all three women were put in jail. She had been so vivid with her descriptions that it became super believable to the judges. She also implicated Osborne and Good and said that they were involved in with the devil, and that she herself had conversations with animals. She felt obligated to hurt young girls. She actually avoided execution, but she was convicted and ended up planting the seed of paranoia that would quickly ramp up this whole chaotic mess.
Yeah. She said, miss me with that execution. Take me out.
Correct.
I'll tell you all the stories.
Same. I would have done the exact same thing.
So after this, mass hysteria broke out through the towns, and more people were accused, like Martha Corey and Rebecca Nurse. Both women were actually highly regarded members of society at the time.
Yeah.
They were both, like, in the church. They were both, like, pretty wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
These are two bitches I'd be like, yeah, they
probably are witches.
Yeah, but they weren't, These two were accused of witchcraft based on spectral evidence, which means that the court literally believed the testimony that spirits were sent through dreams or visions by the accused with the help of literally Satan to harm victims by choking, biting, jabbing them with pins.
Sure.
For instance, if they accuse you of making someone sick on a certain day, but you could say, oh, well, I was with Martha milking the cows. She can act as my alibi. Like, phew, it wasn't me.
Right.
Then the accuser could come back and say, oh, well, yeah, maybe you were with Martha, but your specter was there, and that's how you did it. And you would be like, what is a specter? And they'd be like, yeah, you did it through your specter. And you'd be like, so what is happening? And the judges would be like, sounds like a good idea. I agree with you, accuser.
Yeah.
So it ruined your whole defense.
Totally.
And it could be used to describe a possession in the courtroom doing crazy things also.
I literally heard this one story where they were like, Judge, the so-and-so specter is sitting on your lap right now.
Yes, I heard that too.
And the judge was like, right.
I heard that too.
Get that shit away from me.
Oh, or they would be sitting there and then they'd be like, ah! In the courtroom, and everyone would be like, ah!
It touched me.
What? And they're like, oh, she just jabbed me with a pin, her specter.
You could just while out, and there was no evidence that you could bring up against this.
I would do it back to them.
No, your specter poked me.
I would do it back. I'd be so annoying in the courtroom.
Same.
They'd be like, she's a witch. And I'd be like, what? She's a witch. And then we'd just go back and forth forever.
What I would do is confess to being a witch and then accuse the chief judge of also being a witch.
You're a witch.
I'm a witch. You're a witch.
Your specter told me. So try again.
Not today.
So Nurse was found not guilty, but the jurors were sent out to reconsider by the judge. And then they changed their minds to guilty.
Sure.
She was then murdered on July 19th. Her husband actually eventually got 30 pounds for his loss from the government.
Yeah.
He pleaded his case when they realized that the government was being stupid. He went before the government, was like, you owe me money, compensation.
Is that a lot of money, or does it feel like it's $30?
I know, but it's a lot more than $30.
Okay. Yeah. Conversion rates, inflation.
Oh, I don't even... First of all, any amount of money at this time, it's how'd you get money here? All we have is sticks and leaves.
You have coins?
Rebecca Nurse wasn't the typical defendant in this case. She was married. She was an upstanding person. So the normal rigid social order was completely kind of broken and cracked through her accusation. And then they actually questioned Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter, which is just bad taste in general. And also, what are you questioning a 4-year-old for?
Right.
What are they going to tell you? Because of how upstanding the people were that were being accused, concern spread quickly throughout the community, because if these women could be witches, then literally anyone can be a witch, and we're all screwed.
Yeah. You talked about Sarah Good's daughter, the 4-year-old. Her name is Dorothy. They actually end up putting her in jail for 6 to 8 months. Did you see that?
Yes.
And these were not like modern jails, which are undoubtedly horrible in a different way, but don't get us started on that.
Yeah.
These were like dirt floors, literal hole in the grounds where people would just get sick and die and then be like left there.
Yeah.
Including Sarah Osgood from the beginning of the story. There's one woman who gave birth in jail, and basically they left her there afterward. Her infant actually died in the cell. And this was before the real trials had even started. They're putting these people in jail. Based on accusations alone, the jails began to fill up with over 100 people who had been accused of witchcraft.
Yeah. As these women were accused, many just added to the accusations and the numbers start mounting up because that's like the only way you can get out is you just accuse other people.
Right.
Due to the hot topic, the governor, William Phips, in 1692, created a special court of oyer and terminer, which literally means the court of hearing and deciding, which is like spot on with the name.
That's all courts, right?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. But he was like, we are going to make a court. It's going to be different this time. So this was specifically for witchcraft cases of these counties. The judges were Hawthorne, Samuel Sewell, William Sodden. If that feels right.
Sounds right.
So they would go on to make decisions on many of these cases, beginning with Bridget Bishop on June 2nd. So Bridget was a local older woman who is known for being gossipy and promiscuous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember, these are Puritans, so she probably showed an ankle or had like a lock of hair fall out from under her bonnet, and they were like, oh, she flirting with you.
She a hoe?
She, big time, put the scarlet letter.
Nice.
When asked if she committed witchcraft, Bishop said, I am as innocent as the child unborn. But apparently no one believed that defense. And also, no offense to Bridget, that is not a good defense.
It's not.
Like, you need to be pointing fingers at this time.
Right.
And then she was hanged 8 days later on what would become known as Gallows Hill in Salem Town. 5 more people were hanged that July, plus 5 in August and 8 more in September. I don't like these. I don't like these statistics.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, saying it out loud is bleh. Each of these took place as group hangings, which is even almost worse for some reason.
It's like they didn't even give them the time and respect to do them one by one. They just... get it all over with.
I don't know. And they wanted a spectacle, I believe, is the other thing. And people didn't have a lot of entertainment, because they were like dying at 16. So
yeah,
I say that, but a lot of these people are old. So maybe they lived longer than I think.
They are old.
It was just a lot of murder. And I say murder because they were murdered by the government.
Mm-hmm.
So their group hangings and their bodies were put into mass graves, which is also really sad. And apparently the story goes that their families would come back at night to get them and put their bodies in hidden graves to have their own funeral ceremonies, which was actually not allowed by religious leaders. So, shout out to their families for that.
Honestly, though, can you imagine, you lose your loved one in a horrible way, and then the church is like, yeah, you can't have their bodies. We're throwing them in this hole over here.
It reminds me
horrifying.
Of when I taught world history, there were all of these moments of conquering where they would put people that they had conquered, their bodies in mass graves, in an act of defiance against the cultural request of the people they had conquered. And that's what it feels like here.
Yeah.
Another way to disrespect those people, which I do not like.
I totally agree with that. So instead of coming back from this short trip away and seeing how crazy things had gone and telling everyone to chill out, the governor comes back from this trip and he's like, okay, we have to start putting people on trial because we got to clear these jails out.
There's a lot of people in these jails.
Can you imagine? You're gone for a month and you come back and there's 100 witches in jail.
No. I would go back wherever I came from.
I would be like, why are so many people in jail?
Why are there so many witches?
Why are there so many witches in this tiny town of people?
My concern is, where did we go wrong not noticing the witches before?
Yeah.
That would be my question.
Bro, I've been gone for 1 month.
And there are witches now. Great.
Witches everywhere.
I'm going home. I'm going back where I came from.
And now I feel like we have to talk about Cotton Mathers.
Yeah.
Because this guy is a huge player in all of this. Not a
player, but a piece of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you see his face, Cotton and his father Increase Mathers, which, what a name.
That is a
super stupid name.
That was the person who was like, I'm going to be different than these 5 other names that we rotate through.
Increase the diversity of the name pool. And they're like, no, shorten it, increase.
Literally. Yeah.
Cotton and increase both look exactly how you think they would look.
Like my foot.
Correct. They're both very preoccupied with the idea that spirits and witches are a real thing, and these things should be feared in their minds. These guys both very much fan the flames of what is going on in Salem. Fun fact, Increase would eventually go on to become the president of Harvard, which still has a wing of the dormitories, I believe, named after him.
Yep.
They should go ahead and change that.
Yep. They should go ahead and apologize for that, too.
Honestly, I don't know you, Harvard, and I don't know what you're about, but I'm going to guess that you should probably change 90% of the names of your wings.
Harvard, let me tell you something. I don't know you either.
And I know that this man especially is a fuckaroo.
Yeah, he is.
While the Salem Witch Trials are going on, Increase and Cotton are both writing these...
I still can't get over his name.
No, same.
I'll never get over that. It's a stupid name.
Stupid name. They're both writing these books and pamphlets and essays about how afraid of witches everyone should be, and they're just like whipping people into a frenzy.
These people only had like two pastimes: surviving and going to church. I mean, literally, that's what they did.
They shit in a hole. I'd like to start there with how bad their lives are.
That's all you needed to say
Period.
to me, to be like, oh God, we need
Period.
to help them.
They probably had one pair of underwear for their whole life.
That's
anyway.
So disgusting.
Yeah, it's disrespectful.
Yeah.
So as a quote-unquote respected minister, Cotton was, in fact, the person who told the courts to initiate the vile, invasive bodily searches of accused women for witch marks. Basically, if you had a mole or a birthmark on your body, they would call it a witch's teat. I hate the word teat.
I do too.
And they would say that you used it as a third nipple to feed your animal familiar. So if you had a pet you really liked, a cat, dog perhaps in your life that you were friendly with, they said that you used this third nipple, wherever it was on your body, to feed your animal familiar, because that was like the mark of a witch.
Why did they say that?
Because they're disgusting.
I'm so uncomfortable. I'm literally so uncomfortable.
Here's what I think happened. Somebody got real carried away with the description of what a witch was.
This whole thing is a story about someone getting carried away.
I've never agreed with anything more. No one has ever been more carried away than these people were in Salem.
Like, this is crazy.
Third nipple. Okay.
Yikes.
And he I know. And he promoted the use of something that would go on to get many people convicted, spectral evidence, which we discussed earlier. Now, I will say Cotton said it should be used, but not exclusively used to convict people. So, like, yay for you, I guess. And we talked about this last week, but there were so many different things that could get you accused of being a witch, and they were so small and inconsequential on their own that it really was just people looking for some reason to accuse you. Somebody's crop failed. Somebody's cow died. Somebody likes their pet too much. Must be a witch. I heard one story where two people were talking about a lawsuit that they had with a third man, and one of them got sick, so they accused him of being a witch.
Yeah, I heard that one too.
Because they're like, I got sick while I was talking about the lawsuit that we have together. And it's like, have you never heard of a coincidence?
Also, it is the 1600s.
Right.
Everyone is a little bit sick.
All the time.
All the time.
Your baseline is like, I am not well.
Yes. So one theory as to what was going on with the convulsing girls in the first place is found in the publishing of a book in 1689 by Cotton called Memorable Providences Relating to Witchcraft and Possession. So this book was really detailed around witchcraft that supposedly, quote unquote, happened a year before with Goody Glover. That's an accused person. Mm-hmm. The account in the book was very similar to the behavior of Elizabeth and Abigail that like really kicked off everything in Salem.
Yeah.
While this is a theory in itself, like people read the book and they acted on it, right? That was the idea, that people were speculating that the girls had access to the book and they started like basically doing the same things and like spreading nonsense and lying essentially.
Oh, that's possible. Yeah.
And that other girls saw them and follow suit, right? Another theory is like just mass hysteria. Mm-hmm. Hello, collective hysteria, group hysteria, like the spontaneous manifestation of similar hysterical physical symptoms may just be another culprit here. Like that could be another thing that happened.
Yeah.
Everyone is really stressed out. it's a chore to exist. Like, everyone is literally trying to survive. There's war. People are afraid of Satan.
Right.
But there are other theories, too, that are more like medical or at least biological.
Yeah. So one question we have around the Salem Witch Trials is, like Jess was saying, the convulsing, the fits, the girls who started all of this, what could possibly have caused that? And there are several theories in modern times that people have come up with where the culprit could be some combination of stress, asthma, guilt, boredom, PTSD, child abuse, epilepsy, delusional psychosis. People also bring up the possibility of some biological root like ergot poisoning, encephalitis, and several other possible reasons, but it's a little hard for me to believe that they kept this up for so long, like the convulsions and the vomiting without some kind of reason behind it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think it's possible that they were maybe bored and they were maybe, what I think happened is they were leaning into it after something actually made them sick.
Oh, yeah. Like, they started throwing up, and then they're like, why am I throwing up?
Yes.
It must be these people making me sick.
Exactly. That's what I think happened, especially after the doctor said they're bewitched.
Yeah.
There's the ergot poisoning theory, which I actually kind of believe, that's published in the magazine Science by Dr. Linda R. Caporael.
I mean, you are looking at the wrong person like that. Like, I should know.
She's a professor at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And she wrote in 1976 this suggestion that the fits could be the result of something called convulsive ergotism. So that's the result of ergot poisoning. It's brought on when you ingest rye grain infected with ergot fungus, which can invade developing kernels of rye grain under warm and damp conditions. In 1691, that harvest in Salem, it was warm, it was damp, it was kind of swampy, and the Puritans actually really focused their diets around cereal and breads made from rye as the staple grain. So toxicologists say that eating ergot-contaminated foods would lead to muscle spasms that may look like convulsions, a crawling sensation on your skin, vomiting, delusion, hallucinations. I totally buy it, honestly.
I agree. There had to be some combination. I don't think, would shudder to think that these girls were just, like, trying to get people killed.
Yeah.
Which once you see it happening, like, you need to call that shit off.
Yeah.
So I think it had to be a combination. Plus, like you were saying, the doctor went in and told them they were bewitched or whatever.
Fun fact, LSD is actually a derivative of ergot, so I think it's a big possibility.
Yes.
Yeah, and I read a story where Abigail actually comes back, I think 10 years later.
Right.
And she apologizes for the whole thing. And she says, at the time, I thought that I was bewitched.
Well, she was a child.
Yeah, she was a kid. What I think happened is that there was actually something medically wrong with them. And then maybe the doctor told them they're bewitched. They start to lean into it.
Right.
This spreads in the form of like mass hysteria to the other girls in the area, or it's possible more than just the two girls had ergot poisoning. Mass hysteria is a really interesting phenomenon, and the podcast Stuff You Should Know did a great episode on it if you're interested in learning more about that topic. Also, this is random. There was a mini ice age happening like right before this time that led to food shortages and economic hardship. So again, it's possible that people needed a scapegoat for how hard their lives were, and the witches met that need because we saw that happening in the European witch trials.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In addition, 7 other accused witches died in jail, while the elderly Giles Corey, Martha's husband, was pressed to death by stones after he refused to enter a plea at his arraignment. I do not understand why they would choose that. They're mad because he wouldn't agree.
Yes.
Probably.
They're mad because he wouldn't say anything.
He said, I am not a witch.
Well, he wouldn't say I'm not a witch. Because what I heard is that if you say I'm not a witch and then you get found guilty, your family doesn't get any of your inheritance. But if you don't talk the entire time, your family could still get your inheritance.
Oh, okay.
So he apparently, while they were crushing him, he said, more weight. He was also 82 at the time. Speaking of people living to be fairly old.
I really got to stop thinking people only live to like the age of 20.
I mean, he must have been the oldest person in this entire town. You have to think.
The oldest person on the entire continent.
He also actually testified against his wife, Martha, but that's none of my business. And then I'm going to sip my tea.
I think that he felt bad then about that, right?
He should feel bad.
I'll just kill myself through this process.
I read some accounts where historians were like, I still don't know why he did this because he testified against her. He immediately recanted. And I think people just got swept up in these trials.
And I do believe that people were so religious at the time.
Yeah.
That if someone of religious leadership was telling you you were doing the right thing, then you would believe them. And I understand why you were so religious at the time, because literally, how are you alive?
And that's why I feel like ultra shame on Cotton Mathers for his part in all of this, because if you're a religious leader...
I keep thinking you're going to say Cottonmouth.
Cottonmouth.
Every time.
Whatever. We can call him Cottonmouth. I'm fine with it.
I hate him, yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about Elizabeth Betty Parris, that we discussed earlier, but I think because she's the first person to really claim she was actually ill, due to being bewitched, I think, like, if she had never, no one would have done it, right? In theory, she, like, really kicked it off. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to go a little bit in detail about her. So she was born on November 28th, 1682, to the Salem village minister Samuel and his wife Elizabeth, again, named after her mom.
Weird.
Only 10 names. In 1691, Elizabeth and her cousin began to undertake experiments in fortune telling. So they were like, actually witchcrafty bitches. And they were focusing like on their future social status and their potential husbands, which are like big ticket items when you live only to be 30.
Yeah.
So they shared this game with other young girls in the area, even though the practice of fortune telling was regarded as like demonic activity and it was like super frowned upon. And I wonder if someone discovered them doing it. And that's why.
I kind of wondered that same thing when I read about this, because I was like, number one, who amongst us, do you remember those
fortune tellers?
The things that you put on your fingers, the little fortune tellers, and you go back and forth and then you have people pick one. Like, that probably would have been considered witchcraft. If you're like, oh, I'm going to marry a football player and I'm going to live in a shack. Remember the MASH game?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Like, I feel like that's basically what they were doing, and then someone caught them doing it. Yeah. I think you're right about that. And they were like, oh, it's because I'm bewitched.
I feel like at the time, anything was witchcraft. Like, petting your cat is like, that's a little too much. So that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
By January of the next year, 9-year-old Betty, Elizabeth, appeared to have like secret preoccupation and was forgetting errands. She was unable to concentrate.
Oh, that's a big no-no in Puritan culture.
Yeah. What are you meaning by this? Like, you can't daydream.
Right.
You only have so many days.
She's also 9.
She then began to act, in strange ways. This is when she was like barking like a dog when her father would like tell her something. She was screaming wildly when she heard the Our Father prayer. Now, that would scare the shit out of me.
Correct.
As a parent, I'd be like, immediately get out. Good luck.
No, thank you.
Yeah. And once she hurled a Bible across the room, which, like, absolutely not, ma'am. Stop doing that. That's so scary. I would be so scared.
Same.
So after these episodes, she's like so sobbing, and then she's like speaking about being damned because of like fortune telling maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Reverend, her dad, thought he could cure her with prayer, but that didn't work because, didn't work. And in fact, her actions got worse with prayer. So soon she was like contorting her body into odd postures, consistently spouting foolish and ridiculous speeches, and like generally having fits and like acting an ass, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's just like not what you want to see in life.
If my child started screaming during the Our Father prayer, and then contorting her body into odd postures and vomiting, I might call in an exorcism. And that's not even my vibe, and I might do it because it's a lot.
I would do it.
It's a lot.
So this Reverend John Hale at a nearby town said that he like saw the girls, both of them, Abigail and Betty, and said that it was as if they were bitten and pinched by invisible agents. So their arms, necks, and backs turned this way and that way and then returned back again. So it was impossible for them to do it themselves, and beyond the power of like epileptic fits or natural disease to affect.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were taken dumb and their mouths stopped, their throats choked, their limbs racked and tormented, so as might to move a heart of stone to sympathize with them. So people would see them and they were like, oh my God, like, are you well?
Something's really wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is when that local physician, she says with massive air quotes, diagnosed them with being afflicted by the evil hand, aka like they were bewitched.
Right.
And the sufferers of witchcraft at the time were believed to be the victims of a crime. So the community is like, okay, she's suffering witchcraft. We got to figure that out.
We already talked about this, but it's interesting, the 3 people that she immediately chose to name.
Yeah, she's like ready.
She's like, who do I know that they will believe me as a witch? 1, 2, 3.
Done.
Got them.
Yeah. I want to say, too, like, when the trials were over, Betty would marry Benjamin Barron, who's like a trader and a shoemaker, had an ordinary life.
Huh.
They had 4 children.
That's so interesting.
And she survived her husband by 6 years and died in her home.
She also did Betty Paris ever do anything publicly like Abigail Williams did? I don't think she did, right? Because I only saw that Abigail Williams apologized.
I didn't see anything.
Where she was basically like, hey, sorry for my part in this. I think we got caught up in it and it was bogus, right?
Yeah, I saw that too.
So in the end, public support for all this nonsense waned, and eventually the court was dissolved by the governor.
Yeah.
People were released, and anyone who was tried after 1693 was found not guilty, and by May of that year, the jails had no more quote-unquote witches. By the time the less crazy people in the town realized what was going on and tried to stop it, with several people even recanting their testimony, it was too late, and 24 people had already been put to death for the crime of being a witch.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
On January 14th of 1697, I almost said 1967.
Gotcha.
The Mass General Court said there would be a day of fasting because y'all were way out of line, and please use this day to do some soul searching and figure out what the hell happened here.
Yeah.
That same court said the trials were unlawful, and eventually Judge Samuel Sewall publicly apologized for his role and confessed that he had acted in error. Bitch, it's too late for that now.
Correct. I mean, 24 people are dead, so.
Who are you apologizing to at this point?
Who are you apologizing to? They all died. In 1702, the court declared the trials unlawful, and in 1711, the colony passed a bill restoring the rights and good names of those accused and granted £600 restitution to their heirs. However, it was not until 1957, more than 250 years later, that Massachusetts would formally apologize for the events that occurred in 1692. You can actually still go to Salem, and if you want to do it like my mom and I, there's a very creepy animatronic museum where you can go watch robots play out the trial. Highly recommend getting a beer before you go. And maybe also after you go.
Yeah, you can go with your mom to that. That's not for me.
It was so creepy. And that's what we know about that.
Thank you for listening. We take recommendations. Send us a DM if you have a topic for us to cover. We hope you learned something here.
We hope you liked this episode as much as we liked putting it together and recording it. And if you do like what we're doing, don't forget to leave us a review wherever you like to listen. They really help. And don't forget,
malpractice makes perfect.
Bye. Bye-bye.